The Queen, the behind-the-scenes story of the ructions between Buckingham Palace and 10 Downing Street around the time of the death of Princess Diana. Two splendid performances, one of which won an award at the Venice Film Festival by Helen Mirren as the Queen, obviously, and Michael Sheen as Tony Blair. And he did Blair before in that TV production, The Deal, which was about the Blair Brown crisis.
Dave Morrissey was Gordon Brown, which he had to pork out for.
And he then went on to lose that weight for Basic Instinct 2. Currently available on video, and believe me, it's a much better film than most critics gave it.
So Michael Sheen is repeating his Tony.
But he does a very good Tony Blair. I mean, he's clearly a very good mimic. If you saw the Kenneth Williams that he did as well, that was absolutely terrific, and he's very, very good as Tony Blair.
But he did, I mean, I thought it's a very interesting impression if it makes him a bit of an idiot.
Yes, it does make him a bit of an idiot, but in the context,
he clearly isn't.
No. But
it's another issue.
In the context,
not an idiot.
In the context of this, it's not the same. I mean, it's not the same character as the character in The Deal. But there are definitely similarities in the portrayal. The portrayal here is a lot less broad. The thing with The Deal was, I think it was playing much more for satire, much more as a sort of, sarky riposte to that, which is exactly what that situation deserved. In this case, it's dealing with a subject matter which is slightly more melancholic, obviously, and perhaps slightly more touchy, because we are still slightly more touchy, both about the royal family and, of course, about the Diana tragedy. There is a lot of the news footage of the trauma surrounding Diana's death, which it is funny how even just, and funny peculiar as opposed to funny ha-ha, just seeing clips of that news footage, of that outpouring of national grief, it's incredible how much it just provokes a knee-jerk reaction and you find yourself welling up. It's such a strange event. So much has been written about it, but it is still such a strange event. And actually one of the themes of the film is that the Queen and those around her are completely unprepared for what happens when that event happens. And a lot of the movie is to do with they don't know how to deal with it. The government, who, with their whole New Labour agenda and their modern agenda and dealing with the press, do somehow understand how to take the national mood. And it's about the dynamic between 10 Downing Street and Buckingham Palace. In fact, calling the thing the Queen does it something of an injustice. It should really be called, Liz and Tony, or perhaps Liz and Tony and Di, because it is really about those two characters. My problems, however, are this. It originated as a made-for-TV production for Granada TV, and I have to say that I think it is still better served on television, despite the fact there's a quote on the poster from a leading British film critic that says the best film of the year. It isn't. Whether or not it's a film is actually open to question. I mean, I'm not questioning for 1 minute Stephen Frears is a person who can work in different mediums, but I don't think it's particularly cinematic. I think actually it's very televisual, and had I seen it on television, I would have no reservations about it at all. In the cinema, I think it is slightly swamped, and its shortcomings are slightly more apparent than they ought to be.
Should we wait for it to turn up on the smallest Odeon screen possible?
No, wait for it to turn up on television. I mean, it's already... I mean, the thing is, because of the subject matter, because if you remember what happened to Mrs. Brown, which to all intents and purposes was a sort of televisual film anyway, and then, of course, Her Majesty Mrs. Brown, as they in the American advert, Her Majesty Mrs. Brown. They loved doing that. It was
one of those bizarre, but that was one of those things. You pay your £5 or whatever, and the first thing you see on the screen is BBC Scotland.
But that in itself is not a bad thing, because the BBC have produced and financed many very, very cinematic films. I just don't happen to think that this is one of them. I mean, there's also a case recently where there was the Antonia Bird made-for-TV production, The Hamburg Cell, which was about, the events leading up to 9/11, which I thought was crying out to be in the cinema. And actually, that was straight to the television, and I think that could have done with a theatrical platform. So I suspect that actually, when we get out into America, I mean, clearly it's done very, very well at Venice. Critics over here have been very, very fond of it. I think it will do well in America, partly because just the subject matter that it's dealing with, people still have an interest in. I don't know that it really should be in the cinema. I think it's better served on television.
One critic I was he's not actually a film critic, just someone who'd seen it, who had a bit of an agenda.
Everyone's a critic nowadays.
Okay, said that's true, but none quite so entertaining or forthright.
Thank you.
So that actually, clearly the intention of this film was to be anti-monarchist, that's what this picture is saying, but that you still leave the film thinking the Queen, she's pretty extraordinary.
I don't actually think that it is clearly anti-monarchist. I think you come out of it thinking, as I suspect a lot of anti-monarchists do, that the establishment of the monarchy is old hat and outmoded and all the rest of it. But the Queen herself is, I mean, it's really funny. Recently, they interviewed John Lydon, and forgive me if I'm misquoting him, but I think John Lydon said, when I did God Save the Queen, it wasn't her, it was the institution. I actually don't think she's all bad. I think that's what he said. If I'm misquoting him, I apologise. But I think there's a lot of people who think that. And I think that Helen Mirren's portrait of the Queen is a very good portrait of somebody dealing with the word they keep using, an unprecedented crisis in which the Constitution has come up against, well, not the Constitution, you know, the rigmarole has come up against a circumstance which it couldn't possibly imagine. How do you fly the flag over Buckingham Palace at half-mast when the Queen isn't in Buckingham Palace? And the rules say if she's not in Buckingham Palace, you don't fly the flag. And the frisson, the interest, is in Tony Blair and his people coming from this whole new media-friendly zone and dealing with these ructions with the royal family. And in fact, in the scenes, as I think you heard there, between Tony Blair and the Queen, Helen Mirren's version of the Queen comes out of it with her head held higher than Michael Sheen's version of Tony Blair. But I still think it's a TV movie.